Hi everyone, my name is Tristan, and today I'm going to show you how to make a wristwatch out of epoxy. The first thing I had to do was take apart a watch to have parts to copy. I primarily wanted to recreate the case and case back, and this meant I needed to take everything apart. Now there are many videos on YouTube showing you how to do this. You do need a few specific tools, but overall it's not too difficult. Primarily, just be careful, especially when removing the stem, the movement, and the crystal, as you don't want to break any of them. Once the watch was taken apart, I used the case to measure out a template on some corrugated plastic. The template was cut out and made into an open top box. You want to make sure you seal the edges to prevent leaking. I also did this for the case back, and these would be the molds. I made sure to leave about 1/2 inch on every side of the part to ensure there would be enough material around it. I also cut some small pieces of wood to be used as supports to raise the parts off the box. These would also act as the holes to pour epoxy into. Next, the silicone for the mold was mixed. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, and you just mix it and stir it well. You want to make sure you have a single color before you pour it. Once you can pour, you want to pour slowly to try to minimize the amount of bubbles. This worked pretty well for me, but one thing I learned is to make way more than you think you need, as you use it up pretty quickly. Once the silicone cured, the molds could be taken out and cut open. Do this in a pattern so you can tell how the mold goes back together. Both parts took some consideration as how I would cut them open due to their geometry, especially for the back as it's very thin. Once the parts had been removed and the wood blocks taken out, the molds could be put back together. I used some wood strips to support the case mold. Probably didn't need to do this as they were just on the sides, but for the case back, it just went back into the same box that was used to make the mold in the first place, and rubber bands were used to hold the sides up. Now, the molds are ready to make some parts. The epoxy being used was also a 1-to-1, and once stirred well could be poured. This was done slowly to try to reduce bubbles, and I periodically tapped the mold just to make sure the epoxy was filling evenly. After curing for a day, the molds could be opened. This was when I realized I'd made a mistake, as I had forgotten to use mold release. In the end, this turned out to be okay, but I did have to ruin all of my molds to get my parts out. This mainly meant new molds would be needed for any repours. The case also required a lot of cleaning to get all the silicone off, but the lack of mold release was only really a problem for the case back, as I partially destroyed the first one getting it out. Here we can see the original and the plastic copy. They look good, but you can see some silicone still stuck on the inside of the plastic one. Now I just had to put the watch back together. I had to use the original back as the replacement copy was too flimsy to be used and wouldn't stay in place. I also found out the lugs were too flimsy to use the original spring bars to hold the strap on. To use the spring bars, I would have had to reinforce the lugs somehow. Instead, I pressed a flattened paper clip all the way through both sides, bent the ends up, and cut them off. Everything else press fit in pretty easily, and I used some adhesive on the crystal to ensure it stayed in place. Now, once everything was back together, I just needed to set the time and set the date, and I would have a working watch again. Thanks for watching.